right? There's not much you can do about it. And finally, okay, now you can spend the next 2 days thinking about this, but initially, Judge Orrick, his name was William Orrick. He was the federal judge that sat on a trial in which, this was U.S. v. Washington Phase 2, and Judge Orrick heard testimony about these two issues. Okay, this first issue was whether or not hatchery fish should be included in the treaty fishing allocation. We're just going to, the answer to that was yes, it should be. But the state said, hey, we should include these hatchery fish, right? If they had won that argument, that would have just, obviously, because hatchery fish is pretty much what's left, right? So if you take away hatchery fish and say, no, you can't include that in the treaty fishing allocation, then obviously that would be terrible. But fortunately, Judge Orrick, thought that was kind of a crazy argument. But this is the really big issue right here, okay? The tribes continue to assert that the treaties impliedly reserve to them a right of fisheries habitat. They have the right to their fisheries habitat being clean and healthy, right? And look at what the other side has done to it. They put all these dams, they've slowed down the flow rate, they've polluted it, they've just messed it all up. And that's all a treaty violation, right? All those things are treaty violations, if this reading is correct, right? And amazingly, initially, Judge William Orrick agreed with the tribes, okay? And he handed down his ruling, and he said yes to this question, and he said yes to this one, right? And then I'm not sure what happened, but it was appealed. And on appeal, Judge Orrick's decision was overturned, okay? This decision was overturned on appeal. And that was the end of it. And it's just hanging there. This question, but it was overturned on procedural grounds. And that means, what that means is that the court has never actually decided this question. And the tribes, at any time, the tribes could direct their attorneys to relitigate this issue. They could start this lawsuit over again if they wanted to, right? But they have not, and it's been almost 40 years now. So they decided not to appeal the case any further, and the issue of treaty rights, right? And the flip side of treaty rights is is obligation, right? Obligation. Lawyers call it environmental servitude, right? The tribes assert that the treaties impose an environmental servitude on state governments of Washington and Oregon and Idaho, right? To protect, right? States are obligated to protect because the states succeed to the federal government's obligations. Anyway, but that issue is still out there. At some point, the tribes could relitigate. But the reason they don't relitigate is that they're worried that if they lose, and this answer is finally answered no, right, by the courts, then the door will be slammed shut, and they don't want the door to be slammed shut. They're kind of more comfortable, holding out hope that at some point the habitat will be cleaned up and some of the dams. But the tribes, for a long time, the tribes have called for removal of those 4 lower snake dams. And now they have this 3 sovereigns framework. Whenever there are disputes, whenever the tribes have grievances, they bring it up with the state governments and with the feds. And so far, they've been able to work out compromises that have been to the tribe's satisfaction. And that's why the tribes, they're relatively happy the way, yes. But obviously their fishery has been demolished, and it's kind of hard to be happy when that's happened. But anyway, we got it through all this material, and Thursday we'll talk a little more about Thomas Birch. And thank you for all your patience. I'll see you all on Thursday. Wait, today's Tuesday.
I was like, oh, it's Thursday, all right. That's right.
Oh, thank you very much.
How do they determine, say, like commercial fishery, practice fishery, or
Commercial fishing on the Columbia side. The only commercial fishing allowed now is by the tribes. And And they have their own enforcement. They have their own. It's called the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, and they have a similar one for the Puget Sound area, but they have their own enforcement. They have their own cops. They have their own boats and everything. So
That's, yeah.
they're supposed to enforce it. Now, I've heard from some people that enforcement is terrible, and
Nothing makes.
It was just a